Good evening. My name is Laura McDonald Sutton. And if that name rings a bell for you, especially those of you from Cuero, well, it should. I want you to know that I'm still angry about what happened in April of 1874, the day they shot my husband like a dog in Indianola, the day those Taylors killed my husband. My husband was Willie Sutton, a good Texas man born in Fayette County in 1847, came to DeWitt County in 1850 with his family, fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War as a good Texan did, and then returned to DeWitt County when it was over so that he could try his hand at ranching and farming. That's when he ran into those Taylors. Now those Taylors, they ran around like they owned the place. They said they came out of the East in the early 1800s, some of the first people to live in this part of Texas. Those Taylors liked to fight. The patriarch of the family, old Creed Taylor, well, that man fought in the Texas Revolution, then he fought against the Comanche, then he fought in the Mexican-American War, and he even enlisted in the Confederacy. They said if you had a fight, you had a Taylor. Now those Taylors, they lived up and down the Guadalupe River in southern DeWitt County, and they made their living at ranching and farming. They also liked to gather up maverick cattle, and they weren't too shy about putting their brand on cattle that weren't mavericks, if you know what I mean. Now those Taylors, they were probably good people, especially in the early part of Texas history, but something happened to them after the Civil War. They got to hating all things Yankee. They hated E.J. Davis in the governorship, they hated Reconstruction, they hated having Union soldiers in their towns and on their streets, and they hated anyone who worked with the Yankees. Well, my husband Willie, he came back from the Civil War and he wanted to make something of himself, and he couldn't do that with a lot of people shooting things up and killing Union soldiers and rustling cattle, so Willie sided with law and order. And he knew if he was going to get anywhere in Texas, well, that would mean getting along with the Yankees. So Willie became a deputy sheriff in DeWitt County. And when E.J. Davis made the Texas State Police, well, he joined that as well. And soon he had about 200 men at his disposal. Now you can imagine, with my husband with the Yankees on one side siding with law and order, and those Taylors on the other, that there would be violence. And soon enough there was. And when it erupted, they called it the Sutton-Taylor feud, the most violent feud in Texas history. Lasted from 1868 to 1876, took the Texas Rangers to stop it, and it destroyed the town of Clinton, Texas, which used to be the county seat of DeWitt County. Sutton-Taylor feud was just terrible, killed 23 of theirs, 13 of ours. Now, what started the feud? I don't know. Willie said it started in January or February of 1868 when he went up to Bastrop County chasing a horse thief by name of Charles Taylor and shot him dead. But the Taylors, they said something else. They said it started Christmas Eve, 1868, when my husband and Buck Taylor got into it in the streets of Clinton. Now, they might have been doing a horse trade, or maybe Buck called my husband a liar, or maybe they just hated each other. But whatever reason, my husband shot and killed Buck Taylor on the streets of Clinton, and those Taylors never forgot it. They ramped up the violence, they were shooting at Union soldiers, they were rustling, so the Texas State Police sent a man by name of Jack Helm into DeWitt County. He started hunting Taylors. And when he came, it got bad. One day, August of 1870, Jack and my husband went down to old Pitkin Taylor's farm down in Taylorville, down where the Taylors lived, south of Clinton. They went down there to pick up two men by name of William and Henry, son-in-laws of Pitkin Taylor. They had a charge of disturbing the peace. They were going to bring them in, but as they arrested these two men, one of their wives decided to follow, because she said the Texas State Police, well, they never brought anyone back alive. Some people said the Texas State Police were nothing more than assassins for E.J. Davis. Some said they were hired killers. Some were right. Well, when the two men were picked up by my husband and Jack Helm, well, this woman got in her carriage and she followed to see what was going to happen. She said she came over a hill, looked down into a clearing, and there was her husband sitting on the ground with his pipe in his hand. And my husband was standing over him. And she said her husband went to strike a match on his boot to light his pipe, and my husband shot him in the back of the head. And then the rest of the men dispatched the other man as well. Well, she went back screaming cold-blooded murder. She said it was murder, it was assassination. She told everyone. And old Pitkin Taylor, well, he raised hell about it. So a couple months later, he woke up to hear the sound of a cowbell in his corn. He came out to shoo the cattle away, and somebody shot him. He died several months later, a fatal wound, and at his funeral, the Taylors said they heard that my husband and the Texas State Police were celebrating and drinking. They swore, those Taylor boys, on that day that they would kill my husband and wash their hands in his blood. And it wasn't long before the youngest Taylor boy, Jim Taylor, was hunting my husband. Poked a shotgun through a door of a saloon in Cuero, tried to kill him, he missed. Tried to kill him again on the streets of Cuero a couple months later, missed again. Then they brought in John Wesley Hardin, the killer, to add to their side of the feud. And they spread that feud down to Yorktown and over to Clintonville and down to Thomaston. And it got to where all of southern DeWitt County was part of the feud. You couldn't go out without a gun on. They killed Jack Helm. John Wesley Hardin shot him. Then they killed a deputy, too. Well, right about then, my husband married me. I was 17, out of Victoria, and I got pregnant almost immediately. And we said, we maybe need to get out of here because Jim Taylor's not going to stop until he kills Willie. And Willie, I think once Jack died, he thought he didn't really like what he was becoming in this feud. So he thought we needed to get out of there. We moved back to Victoria, but that wasn't far enough. So we hatched a plan. We would send Willie's cattle up to Kansas City, and then we'd take a steamer out of Indianola over to New Orleans, and then we'd make our way to Kansas City, and from there we'd live until the feud died down. We'd just leave Texas altogether. So we got us a bodyguard, young Gabe Slaughter. We got on a wagon. 1874, we went down to Indianola. Found our steamer, got on board, felt pretty safe. Indianola was a big town, no time for that nonsense like you find in DeWitt County, and we were standing on the deck. And all of a sudden, Gabe Slaughter said, "Isn't that Jim and Bill Taylor walking this way?" And my husband said, "Yeah." And Gabe said, "Shouldn't we go get our guns?" And my husband said, "Don't worry." He said, "Well, Jim and Bill are too much men to do anything right now." So we stayed on the deck, and they came on board. Jim Taylor shot my husband in the head, and then again in the chest, and Bill Taylor put 2 slugs through Gabe Slaughter's face. Well, I screamed. I fell to my knees. I screamed, "My husband." I heard later how Jim Taylor tried to shoot my husband again and again and was prevented by a woman from Victoria who draped herself over my husband's body and said, "You cold-blooded murderer, let this man die in peace." Well, I was 4 months pregnant. I went back to Victoria, stayed with my family. Had a son. I named him Willie Slaughter Sutton. I thought that was right. And I put out an ad offering money for the reward for the capture of Jim Taylor. And I told everybody what to look for, too. Unshaven, dirty, filthy, low character. That's what you were looking for. They eventually came to no good end, but it wasn't by my hand. Kept up a correspondence with Minnie Slaughter, one of Gabe Slaughter's family members, for the rest of our lives. But I want you to remember my husband and one other thing before you go. I've got $1,500 for the man among you who can bring Jim Taylor to justice or put him in the ground. Thank you.